People talked over me like I was static on the radio. That's the only way I can describe it. I'd be standing right there, smiling, nodding, holding a glass of wine I didn't even like, and conversations would float past my head like I wasn't real. Meanwhile, my sister Nora would walk into the same room and the energy would shift. Chairs would turn, voices would rise. Someone would always say her name like it tasted good in their mouth. "Nora, you look amazing. Nora, how's the new place? Nora, I saw your post. Wow, you're really living." And I'd be right there, same parents, same last name, same blood. Background noise. It wasn't always like that, but it feels like it was. Growing up, Nora learned early how to perform. She laughed loud, told stories with her hands, cried just enough to look sensitive without being uncomfortable. I was quieter. I listened. I noticed things. I remembered birthdays without Facebook reminders. None of that sparkled. At my cousin's engagement party, Aunt Linda hugged Nora like she'd just returned from war. "We are so proud of you," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You really did something with your life." I stood 3 feet away. I had driven 2 hours to be there. I had brought a gift. I had taken a day off work I couldn't really afford to take off. Linda glanced at me afterward, blinked, and said, "Oh, hi, sweetie," like she'd just noticed a coat rack that had feelings. I smiled. I always smiled. That was my role. Later that night, I overheard my mom in the kitchen with 2 women I didn't know very well. "Nora's just always had that spark," she said, stirring a drink. "She knows how to shine. You know how some people are born for more?" I waited for her to say my name. She didn't. On the drive home, Nora talked the entire time about her promotion, about her boyfriend's surprise trip, about how exhausting it was being asked for advice all the time. She didn't ask me a single question. At one point, she sighed and said, "You're lucky, you know? You don't have all this pressure." I watched the headlights stretch across the highway and wondered when exactly my life had become the thing people compared themselves against to feel better. The thing was, I did have a life, a quiet one, a carefully built one. I had a job people relied on, even if they didn't clap for it. I paid my bills, I helped Dad with his insurance paperwork when Nora was too busy. I sat with Mom during chemo appointments while Nora sent inspirational texts from brunch. But none of that showed up in photos. At Thanksgiving, Dad raised his glass and made a toast. "To Nora," he said, beaming, "for always aiming high." Everyone clinked. I lifted my glass a second too late. He didn't mean to hurt me. That was the worst part. No one ever did. I was just invisible. Then, one night, something small happened. So small no one else noticed. We were at a friend of a friend's birthday dinner, the kind with dim lights and expensive cocktails. Nora was late, of course. Everyone asked where she was. When she finally walked in, phones came out, compliments flew. I was already seated. The waiter came by and asked, "Who hasn't ordered yet?" I said, "I haven't." He looked right past me and said, "Ma'am," to the woman behind me. I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger, not sadness, something colder, quieter. Later, when Nora started telling a story I'd already heard 3 times, someone interrupted her and said, "Wow, your sister must be so proud of you." Nora laughed. "She is." She didn't look at me when she said it. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and realized something that scared me more than being ignored. I didn't want their attention anymore. I wanted control. I wanted something that didn't need applause to exist. A week later, I got an email at work, just the subject line. "Can we talk?" It was from Mark. Not that Mark, the charming one Nora briefly dated and then dismissed like a bad haircut, but Mark Ellison, our uncle's old business partner, the quiet one, the one who used to sit at the edge of family gatherings and leave early with a polite smile and untouched dessert. We hadn't spoken in years. "Can we talk?" he'd written. No emojis, no exclamation points, just that. I stared at it longer than I should have, then typed back, "Sure." I don't know why my hands were shaking. Maybe because for once, someone was asking me. We met 2 days later at a cafe near my office. Mark looked older, thinner, like someone who had spent a long time holding his breath. After small talk that felt stiff and unnecessary, he leaned forward and said, "I've been watching your family for a long time." That sentence landed wrong. My shoulders tensed. "In a not creepy way," he added quickly, then sighed. "I mean, from a distance. After your uncle passed, things got complicated, and I promised him something." I waited. Years of being ignored had trained me well. "Your uncle trusted you. Not Nora, not your parents, you." I laughed before I could stop myself. It came out sharp, almost rude. "You've got the wrong person." He didn't smile. "No, I don't." He slid a folder across the table. I didn't open it yet. I was afraid if I did, something irreversible would start. "He said you'd never ask for more than you were given, that you'd notice things other people missed, that you were steady." No one had ever used that word before me. Inside the folder were documents I didn't fully understand yet. Numbers, names, dates. But one thing was clear. Something had been set aside. Something quiet. Something that had grown while everyone else was busy applauding Nora's life. "This isn't a gift," Mark said. "It's responsibility, and it's already yours. It has been for a while." I finally looked up at him. "Why are you telling me now?" "Because your sister is about to make a very public move, and when she does, people will start paying attention to you, whether they want to or not." My phone buzzed on the table, a text from Mom. "Did you see Nora's announcement?" I hadn't. I didn't need to. Mark stood to leave, paused, then said quietly, "Background noise can become very loud when the signal changes." I sat there long after he left, the cafe humming around me, the folder heavy in my hands. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt like the room just hadn't caught up yet. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it click every third rotation like it was keeping time for something I couldn't see yet. The folder sat on my kitchen table, unopened since I got home, like it might move on its own if I looked away too long. I kept replaying Mark's voice in my head. Not a gift, a responsibility, and wondering how many times I'd mistaken silence for emptiness. By morning, my phone was already warm in my hand. Nora had posted a professionally lit photo of her and her husband in front of a glass building downtown. She was wearing white, of course. She always wore white when she wanted to look like she was winning without trying. The caption was long, full of gratitude and vague triumph, tagged with words like growth, legacy, next chapter. Comments poured in beneath it. Congratulations, heart emojis, people calling her inspiring, brilliant, unstoppable. Mom had commented twice. Dad shared it. No one tagged me. At work, people gathered around someone's phone in the break room. I caught my name floating through the air once, then disappearing. Someone said, "Oh yeah, she has a sister, right?" Like they were trying to remember a side character from a show they watched years ago. I didn't correct them. At lunch, I finally opened the folder. Mark hadn't exaggerated. There were accounts, land titles, a trust structure so carefully built it almost felt intimate. My uncle's handwriting appeared in the margins of one page. Notes, reminders, a single sentence underlined twice. "She sees without needing applause." I had to close the folder because my eyes burned. My phone rang. Nora's name lit up the screen. She never called unless she needed something or wanted an audience. I let it ring until voicemail, then immediately got a text. "Why didn't you say congrats yet?" I stared at it, thumb hovering, then set the phone face down. That evening, my parents invited me to dinner. The invitation wasn't warm, it was efficient, necessary, like checking off a box before a deadline. They were already seated when I arrived. Nora was there too, glowing, holding court. She hugged me loosely like she didn't want to wrinkle her outfit. "You look tired," she said. Not unkindly, but not curious either. Busy, I replied. Dinner was a performance. Stories about investors, plans, press. Nora talked about the future like it was a place she'd already been and decided was good enough for the rest of us to admire from afar. Every time she paused, someone filled the silence with praise. I chewed slowly, listened. At one point, Dad turned to me. "So, what's new with you?" The table went quiet. Not interested quiet, expectant quiet. "Works fine," I replied. "That's it?" Nora smiled. "You've always been so understated." Mom laughed like that was a compliment. Something shifted in me then. Not anger, not hurt, just a calm awareness, like I'd finally found the right frequency. "I met someone," I said casually. Nora's smile tightened. "Oh?" "Yes," I said, "an old friend of Uncle's." Dad froze. "Mark?" I met his eyes. "You remember him?" Silence spread across the table, thicker this time. Mom set her fork down. "Why would you be talking to him?" I shrugged. He reached out. Nora laughed, a short sound. "Let me guess, he's got opinions?" "He has information," I said. Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp now. "About what?" I took a sip of water, letting the moment stretch just long enough to feel it. About who was trusted and who wasn't. No one spoke. I stood a few minutes later, thanked them for dinner, and left before anyone could recover enough to stop me. In my car, my phone buzzed again. A text from Mark. "She filed the motion today." I closed my eyes and smiled. Not because I was happy, but because for the first time, the noise around me wasn't drowning anything out. It was setting the stage. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant, the kind of place where voices automatically drop even when you're not talking about anything secret. I arrived early and sat on a hard wooden bench, hands folded in my lap, watching strangers pace the hallway with their own quiet disasters tucked under their arms. Every few minutes, someone would glance at me, then look away, like they couldn't quite place why I felt familiar. Nora arrived 10 minutes late, as expected. She swept in wearing a tailored navy suit, hair perfect, heels clicking with purpose. 2 lawyers followed her, one older, silver-haired, confident in the way money teaches you to be, the other younger, sharp-eyed, carrying a tablet like it was an extension of her body. She didn't look at me at first. She hugged her parents, whispered something that made Mom nod quickly, then finally turned toward me. "Oh," she said, stopping short. "You came alone?" I smiled softly. "No." Her brow creased just a little before she smoothed it out. "Well, good luck, I guess." Luck, like this was a raffle. We took our seats. The room filled slowly. Court clerk, judge, murmurs bouncing off the walls. I felt calm in a way that surprised even me. Not confident, just steady, like standing on ground I'd finally realized was solid. Then the door at the back opened. The sound wasn't loud, but it cut through the room anyway. Heavy footsteps, deliberate. I didn't turn right away. I didn't need to. I felt Nora stiffen beside me. When I finally looked, Mark was walking in. Black suit, crisp tie, posture straight as a line drawn with intention. Behind him was another man I didn't recognize. Older, authoritative, carrying a leather briefcase worn at the edges. A quiet kind of power, the kind that doesn't announce itself. Mark met my eyes and gave the smallest nod. Nora leaned toward her lawyer, whispering fast. I caught fragments. "Why is he here? He's not supposed to be involved. This is unnecessary." The judge called the case. Nora's lawyer stood first, confident, polished, words flowing like they'd been practiced 100 times. He painted Nora as the natural successor, the visible achiever, the one who had carried the family name forward. I listened without reacting. I'd heard this story my whole life. Then it was Mark's turn. He stood slowly, adjusted his jacket, and spoke calmly, clearly. No theatrics, just facts. He introduced himself, his role, his relationship to my uncle. He referenced documents, dates, signatures. The other man stood next, introduced as an independent trustee appointed years earlier, someone no one had bothered to mention because no one thought they'd need him. The room shifted. The judge leaned forward. Nora's lawyer started interrupting, objecting, asking for recess. The judge denied it. Then Mark said my name. For the first time, the room felt like it was looking at me instead of through me. She was entrusted, he said, not because she was loud, not because she was visible, but because she listened. Nora turned toward me, eyes wide now, real fear cracking through the polish. "You planned this," she hissed under her breath. I met her gaze. "No," I said quietly. "You just never noticed me long enough to see it coming." The judge called for a brief adjournment. In the hallway, my parents cornered me. "Why didn't you tell us?" Mom demanded, voice shaking. Dad looked smaller than I remembered. "You could have avoided all this." I tilted my head. Avoided what? "This embarrassment," Mom said, gesturing vaguely toward the courtroom. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "You mean the part where you assumed I had nothing?" They didn't answer. Nora paced a few feet away, phone pressed to her ear, voice low and urgent. For once, no one was listening to her. When we went inside, the judge's tone was different, more serious, more final. But it wasn't over. Not even close. Because as the documents were entered into record, as the trust structure unfolded layer by layer, I realized something else. Something Mark hadn't said yet, something Nora definitely hadn't considered. The land. The part everyone dismissed as sentimental, as useless, as mine only in theory. That was where the real fight was going to be. And Nora knew it too, because when she looked at me again, her expression wasn't anger anymore, it was calculation. And that scared her more than losing ever had. I walked out of the courthouse into the late afternoon light, the kind that makes everything look softer than it really is. The doors closed behind me, heavy and final, but the story didn't feel finished. It felt like it had just cracked open. Nora stayed inside with her lawyers, my parents trailing behind her, still arguing, still trying to understand how the quiet one had become the center of everything. I stood there for a moment, breathing, letting the noise fade, knowing they were truths still buried, choices still coming, and consequences no one was ready for yet. If you want to know what happens next, how this fight spills beyond the courtroom, how the land changes everything, and what it costs when the background finally steps into the spotlight, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next part. Trust me, this story is far from over.